Hi guys, welcome back to the Literary Archives. Today we're going to be reading and analyzing Shakespeare's Sonnet 19. So let's get started. Sonnet 19 by William Shakespeare. Devouring time, blunt thou the lion's paws, and make the earth devour her own sweet brood. Pluck the keen teeth from the fierce tiger's jaws, and burn the long-lived phoenix in her blood. Make glad and sorry seasons as thou fleets, and do whatever thou wilt, swift-footed time, to the wide world and all her fading sweets. But I forbid thee one more heinous crime. Oh, carve not with thy hours my love's fair brow, nor draw no lines there with thine antique pen. Him in thy course untainted do allow, for beauty's pattern to succeeding men. Yet do thy worst, old time, despite thy wrong, my love shall, in my verse, ever live young. Before we dive into the literal and thematic meanings of Sonnet 19, I want to first talk to you about Shakespearean sonnet structure. Shakespearean sonnets are composed of 14 lines, broken into 3 quatrains with an alternating rhyme pattern, A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, and it ends with a couplet, which is 2 lines with the same ending rhyme. So G, G. All the lines in a Shakespearean sonnet are written in iambic pentameter, but we're going to focus more on the construction of the quatrains and the couplet and the rhyming pattern in today's video. When I'm teaching poetry, I love to have my students number the lines. So I'm going to go ahead and number the lines 1 through 14 on the poem. And then what we're going to do is take a first look at the rhyming pattern. So I drew lines across the poem to show where the quatrains break, and you have the first 4 lines, second 4, third 4, and then the ending couplet. If you take a look at the first quatrain, you're going to see that paws and jaws rhymes, as well as brood and blood. So we have an A, B, A, B, fleets and sweets are C, time and crime are D, third quatrain is brow and allow, pen and men, and then it ends with G, G, wrong and young. Now that we have the rhyming pattern written out for each of the lines, let's take a deeper look at the first quatrain. So in the first quatrain, to me, this really stands out. The first 4 lines really stand out as Shakespeare's introduction to time itself. So the whole sonnet feels like a letter written to time, Shakespeare's plea to time. And in the first quatrain, the tone is very scornful. So Shakespeare is seems upset with time. He says words like devouring time to describe time himself. And then he uses verbs like blunt, devour, pluck, and burn. And all of those have a very almost violent connotation, which kind of shows that he is unhappy with time and the way that time is devouring her own sweet brood, or causing the earth to devour her own sweet brood. That word thou, if you're struggling to understand the first quatrain, turn thou into you. So if you read it with kind of that more modern you in mind, it says, devouring time, you blunt the lion's paws, you make the earth devour her own sweet brood, you pluck the keen teeth from the fierce tiger's jaws, and you burn the long-lived phoenix in her blood. All of these animals are very strong and powerful animals, and by accusing time of being devouring and so violent, we get a deeper sense of how Shakespeare feels about time at the start of this sonnet. The second quatrain shifts just a touch, and we now describe time as swift-footed, and that feeds into the feeling of this quatrain as a whole. So in this quatrain, we have make glad and sorry seasons as you will, and do whatever you will, swift-footed time, to the wide world and all her fading sweets. In lines 5 through 7 specifically, this takes a more reluctant acceptance of the role that time plays in our lives. And I imagine that Shakespeare is telling time, take what you will of the world, But then line 8 is a transition line into our third quatrain. Shakespeare forbids time one more heinous crime, leading me into lines 9 and 10. Oh, carve not my love's fair brow with thine antique pen. So even though in the second quatrain he's saying, take what you will of the world, he shifts and he says, but don't touch your time to my love's fair brow. Don't etch lines upon her face. And he uses the word antique. That adjectives paints an old picture of time. So we've transitioned even further towards a more grieving tone. So the first quatrain starts with devouring time, a little bit angry, scornful. We move to swift-footed time, which that whole quatrain, again, has that reluctant acceptance. And now in the third quatrain, we have this grieving tone almost, where please don't do this. He's almost begging time to leave his fair love alone. After Shakespeare begs of time not to carve its antique pen into his love's fair brow, lines 11 and 12 admit that succeeding men, so the men yet to come, will still pick up this pattern of beauty. So this furthers this idea of grief. He doesn't want his love to essentially disappear, but he understands at the end of this poem that time will continue on, and the succeeding men are going to pick up this beauty and this pattern of beauty and continue it forward into the years to come. In the final couplet, lines 13 and 14, I feel like this is Shakespeare's concession, and he finally makes peace with the role that time will play. So the adjective used switches to old time, which is a little bit more familiar. So he says, do your worst, old time, despite thy wrong, my love shall in my verse ever live young. He concedes to the role that time is going to play in the lives of men, but he also says, do your worst, because no matter what, my love will continue to live on in my own poetry. Almost as if he's made peace with the role that time is going to play. And rather than remaining angry as he does in the first quatrain, he's kind of gone through these cycles of pain, and now he's at peace with time and the passing of time. As the tone shifts from the first quatrain to the final couplet, and the use of adjectives to define time lessen in their severity, we get a deeper picture of the guiding topic, which is the decaying nature of time. So as time passes, everything is going to decay, and we can't do anything to stop time, which then leads us into the themes of this poem, where you cannot stop time. No matter how much you might want to, time will continue on, and time destroys all things, and yet all things will continue to live on through time, as his love does in his verse, and as the pattern of beauty will for succeeding men. Sonnet 19 and the topic of time and time passing pairs really well with the short story 3 Questions by Leo Tolstoy. So if you are interested in reading more about this, or you are a teacher and you want your students to work on comparing and contrasting, bring these 2 stories together, the sonnet and the short story, and you will see different perceptions on the passage of time. Thank you for joining me today for this reading and analysis of Shakespeare's Sonnet 19. If you liked it, click the like button and subscribe so you never miss a literary moment, and I will see you next time.